Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Curious Storyteller podcast. I am your host, Blake Kelly. Today, we have the sixth episode in which I am very, very excited to welcome on the lovely, the wonderful, the charismatic, the heartfelt Jeffrey Marsh.
I thought you were
Jeffrey,
going to go down the alphabet.
I could if you
An
want.
adjective for 26 adjectives.
Adjective for adjective for adjective. I am very excited to welcome Jeffrey Marsh onto the podcast today. We'll get into a little bit about how I met them, but first, I just want to say hi, Jeffrey.
Hi. What do you want to say about me and us? Oh, you did it as a teaser. You're going to tell them later
Yes,
how we know each other. Okay.
yes.
So that folks can wait in anticipation
Yes, I mean,
for that
I know
reveal.
Jeffrey basically through, the interwebs, the internet, through, I don't know, Instagram or TikTok. I don't really remember, but I was in like I was in the part of my healing journey where I was like following all the people, all the people you need to follow that have something to say about healing. Um,
Yes, well, and people who are not watching the video did not see that you just put quotes around healing journey.
yes, I did.
You're in that part of your healing journey,
Yes.
which means quite a lot. It means different things to different people, actually.
It does. And I think I use the air quotes because sometimes I feel that that phrase gets used in a trite way and not
Mm,
like a very meaningful way that feels really resonant to me. And I think that's why I use the air quotes, not
yep.
because I don't think the healing journey is important or that that isn't a very significant journey to go down.
Yeah, I'm glad you said trite. I mean, healing gets used in a trite way sometimes, and journey gets used in a trite way sometimes. Put them together, and that gets used in a trite way sometimes.
Yes.
Just sometimes people talk about it without a lot of, um, I just get the sense they haven't gone through it. But that's probably a different discussion.
Yes, that I think that is a different discussion, but I think I resonate with what you say.
Hmm.
Um, so I was on what I would describe as my healing journey, and I found that what you were saying on the internet was cutting through that BS, and it wasn't
Hmm.
just saying, here's the one thing you should know about how to blah 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 blah. It didn't feel like a rigorous test of like how to perform your own healing, which I
Hmm.
feel sometimes on social media can feel like that, even if the people that are doing it isn't always that way. Sometimes I have found that it feels that way on Instagram or TikTok. And then it creates an entirely different complex around like what I should or shouldn't be doing in order to like be on my own healing journey, and then I somehow don't have authority over it anyway. That's like that.
Well, yeah, and it's all based on self-hate.
Yeah.
It's an encouragement into self-hate if you can't quite do your healing journey correctly or whatever the implication is. Yeah, I decided a long time ago I'm not the like here's three tips to deal with a narcissist, kind of video person.
Right.
It's much more about the heart and the commiseration and the shared experience for
a
me.
hun- 100%. And I feel that I felt so deeply connected and resonated with what you had to say because, I mean, one, I could just tell that it was coming from a lived experience. And
Hmm.
I think that something that feels really important to me in the teachers that I have, or the mentors, or the people that I listen to, are people that know what it's like to have that experience. So that honestly, to me, so that I can trust that what they have to say isn't BS.
Well, and yeah, at least it's coming from a place of having gone through it. And here's what's worked for me. I I have the gift of people knowing right away why I was bullied and why I've been through a lot of schniz in my life. I mean, if people are watching the video, they probably get it. You used they pronouns for me earlier. I'm extreme LGBTQ. And my whole life has been a journey of being rejected and learning to transcend that.
Mm, mm.
Don't know if you can relate.
No, not at all. Never. Yes, definitely. I mean, I think that is the experience that I think I've felt shared. And I mean, obviously a lot of people in the LGBT community feel that, but I feel like
Mm,
depending on your experience of where you are and how you are, like there's different levels of rejection and different intensities of rejection and different people that offer that rejection, what that really means to be, to you or someone else. Um, and I think that I decided that I wanted to work with you, to coach with you, because I felt like you had that experience to offer, and you had you had insight to give about around lived experience, and that
mm.
to me is really important, because I feel sometimes, especially in this like coaching space or in the like mentor space or in the healing space, there's a lot of privacy that coaches or mentors have about their own lives. And while I don't necessarily mean that they're not allowed to have privacy, sometimes I'm like, I I don't know who you are, so I'm having a hard time trusting in you as in the other person, because I don't know what you've been through. You haven't shared who you are. And so like there's kind of like a vulnerability thing that I feel like is required sometimes in order for me at least to be on that journey.
Yeah, I'm such a freaking open book. I can't do it a different way. I happen to have studied with someone at the monastery, which I wrote about. You know what I love about you?
Hmm.
You did not go anywhere near my bio, my bona fides, what I've done in my life. So people may not know I've written a book. The first book I wrote
Two books.
was two books, two bestsellers, actually. The first book I wrote about this process. I happen to have had the good grace to have studied Zen Buddhism with a woman. But one of the things that she did, her style of teaching, was to more or less present a finished product, which she was kind of, but to not let us in on any of the personal day to day stuff that might have been going on. And I kind of feel, at least in my personal practice as a offerer, whatever you want to call what I do, coach or whatever, that I want to show the seams and the cracks and the day to day. I don't know if, I mean, I'm not even sure what to call it, but just the humanness is what I would say. I think it's really important so people feel they're not alone and not getting some sort of, I don't know, person who's who's not sharing that stuff.
100%. I
You could tell I'm sort of still formulating all the ideas around it, but I'm
Yeah,
just an
no.
open book, so
That's
I like to talk about it.
that's what I think that's what this is for. Part of this podcast I think is kind of just riffing on the conversation and seeing where it goes, because I've
Mm,
found that resonates more deeply with the authentic expression, rather than like, here's the rubric of how we're going to talk about things.
sure, and that's how healing journeys should be, isn't
Hmm.
it? Yeah.
So I did a couple rounds of coaching with you, and um I felt like it was a really like really honorable, great experience, and like being able to work with someone else that wasn't just that, because I've been in therapy for a very long time, of knowing like what it really means to be in my own experience and honor, what is my own experience. And of course, I read your first book first before I think I signed up for coaching with you. And then I'm on chapter 3 of your second book, which I read last week. And I think I said in the email to you, it like completely wrecked me.
Mm.
um, and like in a way that like I felt called out, but in a way that wasn't, I didn't, that was in a very heartfelt way. And it really allowed me some deep, um I mean, I some deep healing around some forgiveness and compassion for myself around some choices that I make for myself sometimes.
Sure. You want to give an example?
Well, the third chapter is on decision making and or deciding
Yep.
what you want to do and not want to do. And I feel like I have always struggled with that. I've
Mm.
always struggled with decision making and knowing what the right choice to make is. Um, and I've always kind of generally known why that is, but no one's ever really like laid it out for me. There's not been like deeper context of being like, this is sort of maybe why you are the way that you are. And I think that it was from a perspective of like sometimes I didn't always have the answer, but I was like expected early on as a child to have the answers
Ooh,
and to be able to just completely like spit out an answer for someone based on what had needed to happen in that moment. And that was like really not great for me. And so I think as a part of my own, I don't know, like authority or agency, like I think I don't know became a sort of resistance or refusal to demand answers out of someone, especially from someone, for me in this experience when I was very young,
sure.
and in my childhood. And I think that like that really helped me, and also thinking that like when people ask me questions and I need to give them answers, that I have to give them answers immediately, or else I'm missing out, or I'm not going to get what I need unless I answer in that moment. And having to be able, and like even what you were saying of like waiting for more clarity was so resonant for me, because it feels that it's like I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying yes, because I am actually trying to find more information about this. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to be pressured into it, because I feel so much of my life is about being pressured into answering things, like being
Sure.
pressured into giving people answers right away. And then there somehow something being wrong with me because I'm not giving them the answer right away, or the answers that they want. And then they're becoming a complex around that.
Yeah, there seems to be a little bit of an implication that I don't know is somehow a burden on other people.
Mm-hmm.
You said so brilliantly, that you as a young person would be afraid that you wouldn't ever get your needs met unless you could just get them in there real quick. get them fully formed and have them make sense and ask for
Yeah, it's like if you want this, you need to clearly state in perfect English like how
yeah.
and what you need in what way. And that's like a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and I I understand that well in my own life too. Yeah. So I'm glad that chapter resonated with you. That's the depth of what it's about. Also, it's never too late to do nothing, right?
Yes. Yes. I mean, the other thing that really helped me in the second chapter is, and I think it was the second chapter, is the idea of authenticity.
Mm.
And I think for queer people, it's such an important conversation, because I think in a lot of ways, we're denied our own authenticity. And so there's almost this like I don't want to say overemphasis, but there's this heightened emphasis on what authenticity means to us. And I think for me, sometimes what I noticed in that is sometimes I have a hyperfixation on my own authenticity. And that like I'm like, oh, like am I acting in my authentic self? Like there's almost my own sense of like self-improvement when it comes to authenticity, that like
Sure.
I don't even allow myself to be playful, or being playful doesn't mean that I'm denying myself that authenticity. And the thing that really spoke to me was speaking from your place of authority as a sense of your authenticity. And I think I've had a really hard time with that, because I shared something on social media over the weekend that I felt very vulnerable about, but it was honoring my experience, and it was
Mm.
honoring what is real to me, even if it's not something great to say, or if it's not something that like is easy for people to read or like accept, because I think sometimes I feel the pressure that there's so much around like love and lighting life that
Again,
that
quotes,
yeah, again
quotes around that.
quotes, that it doesn't allow me to honor my actual lived experience. And then I feel that by doing that, I'm actually able to share my story of what my life is, rather than what people want my life to be, or how they think my life is, or how I should be acting. I should be an evolved enough person to basically transcend my experience of harm into something
Mm.
that is like so magnificent. And I'm like, okay, yeah, true, but like you have to I have to honor that for myself and what that authority is for me, because otherwise that's not who I am.
Yeah, and there are plenty of people, I think, again and again and again. One issue is that people who are LGBTQ are all assumed to be, or encouraged to be, or judged if they are not, on a trajectory toward Pride Parade and I'm totally out to everybody. And, there is this like cultural conception of what we're supposed to be doing constantly and what is authentic. Now I'm putting quotes around that one. And actually, cis people and straight people have those similar ideas that they're dragging around
Mm-hmm.
about what it means to be authentically yourself.
Mm.
And sometimes just sharing your experience the way it is the best antidote because it cuts through some of the. When you were talking, all I could envision is that it's just another standard for self hate. Authenticity just becomes another thing that you have to do perfectly.
Absolutely. I, I was just
Another
pausing.
pile of BS assumptions that you're supposed to do perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that I don't know, in the process of reading the book and working with you, what I've realized is like how to give myself my own grace of not performing or perfecting the way that I'm figuring this out for myself, which sometimes it feels like I don't have like uh I don't have a map. So it's like I'm kind of figuring this out for myself a little bit, and not trying to think that I need to have all the answers all at once.
Yeah. Um, Especially not like right away.
Mm-hmm.
Don't need to have it right away. Yeah. Can I compliment you and
Of
tell you
course.
something you gave me? So I wanted to wait because everything in and around coaching for me is strictly confidential. So I didn't know if you would even mention it that we did it. But as the coachee, you helped me to grow as a coach and actually sent me on this journey that I'm experimenting with now of not even calling it coaching because that implies some sort of transactional something, some sort. For most people, I think it's so dangerous because it in their head it means being fixed the way that like a self-help Instagram star would say it is like you'll get the tools for your toolbox to something something, you know and it's like that whole thing actually I don't want to encourage because if I could do anything it would be to convince every single person they don't need to change right at this moment. Seeing clearly is much more important than getting on your track to whatever you're supposed to be changing.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course it makes sense. I
And so to me, coaching implies this like transformation, change, blah, 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 blah. But I think most people need, I was going to say most people want, but I don't even know if it's conscious for them. But just my experience, most people need a kind, unconditional presence to mirror to them.
100%. And I think that something that and I think that that is what I have been needing and what I needed in our sessions and just in life in general. And I think that um allowing me to completely be who I am, but also have that mirrored back that it's okay, I think is so important, because sometimes when you're told that, be yourself, be authentically yourself, like accept yourself, like as a queer person, I couldn't believe that because that actually wasn't true growing up. And
Mm,
I feel that I think I get anger when I hear people say that, because I'm like, you don't actually mean that. I was like, and I was like, you don't actually mean that because you don't want me to be who I actually am. And I don't think they consciously understand the depth or the context of the situation. And it's not really about them, but it's sort of like, I knew and I know that you meant it. And I think that for me, that was what
mm.
was so important. Um, and also just like having complete acceptance for the reality that you live in right like in that you are in right now is just so important. And I think that has helped me like change my own perspective around what I quote am supposed to be doing, or how I'm supposed to be growing, or you know, where I'm supposed to go from here, and sort of like what is my life and what is my trajectory, and you know, it's like all of those questions kind of become a little less important to me. But it's also terrifying to me as well, because I don't have that sort of control to hang on to anymore around like thinking that like, oh, in 5 years I'm gonna blah 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 blah, you know, like whatever it happens to be. It I've used a lot of my like future trajectory as a lens of control over my life. Um
In 5 years, I'm going to be really productive and I'm going to be a success and everybody will like me. Okay. Yep. Good luck with that,
Right.
everybody.
Yes, exactly. And I've had that, you know, it's so funny because one of my really close friends, Sam, she used to joke with me a lot, where this was like very early on, like in my, you know, whatever, like me trying to figure myself out. And I would like make incessant lists for myself of things to get done. And she would be like, Blake, like, what? Like just like sit on the chair. Like and I literally, my response to her literally in the time, because this was my frame of reference, I literally was like, I don't know what you mean. I was
Right.
like I was like, I really don't understand what you're saying. um and she would like, you know, we would share a joke, we would laugh at it, like we would kind of laugh at me because like I understood how much I couldn't even understand what that meant. And uh yeah, that was coming up for me just
It reminds me anybody who says, "Oh, meditation is really easy." I mean, you just sit there. It's perfectly clear they've never done it
oh.
when they say that.
Or they like they do it for like 5 minutes and they're like, ah, I'm zen, and you're like,
Yeah,
oh.
right. Their calm app is guiding them the whole 5 minutes. Yeah. And not that that's bad. I mean, that's probably a step to deeper understanding, but it can get very hairy and very difficult when you are in the silence. And can you fill in the picture for me a little bit? You said incessant to-do lists. Like how
Mhm.
many items? What kind of
Oh
items?
God, this was, I mean, I'm talking back in like 20, I gosh, 2015, 2016, something like that. And it was like, I mean, it was just like, it was like, even to have fun, it was like, I'm gonna like make a reservation for dinner. I'm gonna like text all my friends. Like it was like it was so detail oriented around being like, I have to have fun. Like it was like yeah, it was like I
They
had
had
fun.
boxes next to them and you check them off.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like
Or I
I'm
would
gonna
make so many lists that I would only get to two of the things that I made a list of 10 things for.
Oh, well, that's a whole fun, exciting thing. Yeah. Yeah, don't forget to have fun. Don't forget to smile while you're there. And yeah.
Right. So I definitely had to, I mean, obviously I'm Sam helped me realize that, and I've kind of like adjusted my reality as much as I have been able to in that sense. But
I think you
uh
were implying, not to cut you off, don't forget where you were going, but I don't, I think you were implying that it had something to do with control, that
oh,
making these lists was,
yeah, I
I'm this
mean,
person, I'm doing this, I'm accomplishing this, etc.
I think I mean most of my life honestly is built on the sense of trying to feel firm control in my life, and to
Mm.
have not about necessarily saying I have everything under control. It's about the idea of control, so that I know that there aren't any things coming around the corner. And to kind of avoid that, because I experienced a very volatile and very you know, uncertain childhood, that I feel that so much of my frame of reference, and in not even like a way where it's like a thought process, because it's not, it's so much more of like a perspective or experience of saying like I need to be in control, because otherwise like I'm not going to be safe, and I'm the only one that can make me safe. And so like it's almost like a hustle for safety. um
Oh, wait, what did you just say? A hustle for safety?
yeah.
Yeah, it's like a, what do they call that? Side hustle.
Yes.
Except it's a primary hustle, it's a front and center hustle for safety. Wow. Yeah, constantly. My dad was physically violent. So yeah, I'm right there with you. It would, unless I was in control and the only thing in the universe that I could really control was me, unless I was in control, and that's in quotes. I mean, I couldn't even control me. But I had to I had to hate myself so thoroughly that my emotions would be in control, which is a bit of a
Mm,
fool's errand.
mm.
That my spirit would be in control, um, through self-hate, better living through self-hate. I had to do all that, I thought, or which is a natural thing to think, by the way. I thought, or I would be in physical danger, but also emotional danger. I'd be rejected, unloved, you know, die alone in the gutter, that kind of thing.
Mm, mm, mm.
True for so many LGBTQs that we went through that rigor.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it was a lot of fear. Mine was more like less, I think, a little more subtle in the experience than yours. Like my family,
For
like
you, I mean, mine was crystal clear, crystal like what my dad wanted from me and what would happen if I didn't deliver was just omnipresent
mm,
for me. But you're saying yours was a little bit, it took some time to
well,
dig all out of.
everything. I had to pick up context clues
Mm,
relentlessly around what it
mm.
meant to be, what it meant to be a son, what it meant to be accepted in the family, and what it meant to be what I needed to be for them. And that included not being queer because while I don't think I don't, my parents never explicitly were like, queers are bad. Like that was never said, right? But like, we went to church and both churches that my parents went to spoke out against LGBT people. And my parents never explicitly were like, hey, we don't believe that, or hey, like they didn't say that to me. And so I
Yeah.
took that as, if my parents are bringing me to this community organization or to this group that is, quote, my community or my neighborhood or the people that I'm surrounded myself with, and they're so actively spewing hatred towards people, but then using that as a veil for their own spiritual enlightenment, then I'm only internalizing that my parents are co-signing to this. But I can't have the conversation with them asking about that without potentially putting myself in danger.
Without
And
coming out.
yes, without
Yeah.
coming out. And that to me was like so dangerous to me that I couldn't facilitate the conversation. It did not feel safe to do that. And um it was really harmful to me because I felt that I just could not be myself. And so, I also grew up in a very rural community in which there weren't a lot of evidence, or there weren't a lot of encouragement or visibility for LGBT or queer people. And if there was, it was seen very negatively. And I just did not have the encouragement, or the one person in my life, whoever that could be, that could have been a person to be like, hey, it's okay, like it's going to be okay, like this is, you're going through it, but it'll come out at the end. And I just didn't have that person. They just didn't, whoever, it just didn't exist. And I felt very alone and very scared for my own sense of well-being, because I had to completely hide myself. Um, and I had to even high school and middle school, I had to meticulously be like, how do straight people act? Like, how do I present myself? Like, what is masculinity? Oh, like, let me do this thing to like, and let me say this one thing so that people think that I'm whatever, when it was just so clearly, obviously, that like, that I was queer. And I, and I like, I did theater and I did plays, and I like I did all of that because that gave me at least some self expression. But like, me doing theater, I looking back at it, makes me feel like I was doing it because I was like, let me at least perform something that isn't a performance of myself. And I think that I struggled so much in theater and even doing well in theater because I was so focused on being able to have an outlet to express myself rather than being like, what's the role? Like this person, I don't know if I was necessarily thinking about like what character I was in Guys and Dolls.
Sure.
I was like, this is my chance to be on stage and to perform in a way that like isn't a complete performance of self.
Yeah. And to me, I happen to be mega talented. I have a similar story, but it was also a place to get affirmation. No matter what character I was doing, it's like, oh, applause, love, kindness. Wow, they like me. That was a huge part of doing the theater for me. And I was always kind of already performing because we had to be that 3 steps ahead with our, you know, I I came out of the womb tap dancing with eyeshadow on. And yet I had a girlfriend in middle school, you know, Becky, poor Becky. Yeah, it's so much pressure to just not be yourself, even when it's completely obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely F's with your head,
Yes. Yes, it does.
to put it bluntly. Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I guess we're like 30 minutes in. Maybe we should talk about if you're interested in talking about your origin stories of coming into being, quote, a social media person, talker, performer.
That is the theme, isn't it? Well, we kind of got into some of it already. Uh, I started Vine because for fun, really. It was a brand new platform like 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the first video I ever did was singing a song with a guitar, a song I wrote. Vines are 6.5 seconds, so that is literally like half a line of a song. But that was the first video I ever made. But the first video to ever go viral was me dressed as the Statue of Liberty, dancing on my New York City roof to yeah, 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 the party and for July 4th.
Mm.
And that video just took off, and it was very Wild West over on Vine. You couldn't block people initially. You couldn't filter out keywords. You couldn't report
Wow.
people. Couldn't do a thing. And so with the fame came the hate, obviously, from the very, not obviously. Doesn't have to be that way, world. But it is. That's the world we're living in currently. And so it's this deluge of attention and kindness and this deluge of hate. And I still think about that. And I think about young people today, because that's true for any, LGBTQ on social media still, especially one that's gender nonconforming, as I am. And I just think about the place where some people are the most accepted and loved is also the place where they're most often told that they should, burn themselves with fire and be off this planet. Right. It's like that. Just talk about bittersweet, but in the extremes for all of it. And the second video that I did that went viral was a video saying, there is nothing wrong with you to the camera. And both of those taught me a lot about what people needed, wanted, were drawn to.
Mm.
And they actually still are both, a very foundational part of the work I do today.
Yeah, I think that the whole idea, there's nothing wrong with you is such a jarring thing for people to hear when you're
You
when
think?
you, when your entire life is built on the answer that the only way for you to be a better person is through the lens of that there is, right? Even like, even this whole thing of like, oh, like, everything's about me and I'm the, like I'm the one that has to like figure it out, or like I'm the one that has to self-improve. It's like, okay, yeah, like you do have to have a general sense of awareness and a general sense of initiation of wanting to explore yourself. But I think that sometimes is so hyper focused on individualism and it's so hyper
For sure.
focused on this idea of the only way that you're going to heal is through your own, I don't know, like your own mind world, and makes me feel disconnected from people sometimes, because I'm like, okay, well then how are we ever sharing an experience together? Like, um
Yeah.
and how, like, I think, for whatever reason, a lot of my orientation has been built around that there is something wrong with me, right? And it's not just about LGBTQness, although that is an aspect of it. It is this fundamental understanding that, like, there's something that I'm doing that is making people, society, culture, like, name whatever it is, that is making them reject me. And it's been this sort of like chameleonness for me to be like, oh, okay, like, do I have to like move my shoulder, like, and to like somehow figure out a way to make myself more palatable to people. And I think that I've been doing that for a very long time, and it's so hard now to like be like, I'm not even like I'm taking off the mask, but like how I'm peeling those layers back, and then like allowing myself to still be private about the parts of myself that I'm wanting to articulate, but then eventually getting to the point where I want that to be seen. And I feel that that is so, I'm trying to honor that and not rush myself through it, because I feel there's such a pressure I also feel of being like, fuck it, like I'm gonna like here I am, and like everything like that. And I feel a pressure sometimes to be that way, and I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
Blake, but like, do you want to be that way, and are you ready for that? And I think that that's sort of the, I don't know, the journey I'm on right now.
Yeah. And to go back to the bookend of where you started the episode, it's like people say, be yourself, but it's like, are you able to handle that? Are you sure you can? Are you sure you can hold your end of this up? And that's a question. Not a lot of people can. They can't handle people not. I'll be very specific. Just my experience, because the work I do. I don't think it's my queerness. I think that is definitely something that upsets people and triggers them. Absolutely. But it's the self kindness mixed with the queerness. That is the deadly, like, this must stop. You must die. Like, that is the absolute darkest thing for some people. And it's always the extra layers. You could name that second layer anything, that I flaunt it, that I love it, that I, brag about it, that I enjoy it, that I don't have self-hate myself, right? That's the part that I think is most upsetting to people, because self-hating queer people can, you know, um, not be as triggering and upsetting to people. Because I think that culturally, people think that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. Like how dare you be kind to yourself?
Yeah. How dare you be kind to yourself? How dare you be free for just a second?
And
Especially when I'm not. How dare you?
right. And
Yeah.
then the sort of like, I don't know, the pitchforks that come out when you recognize that in yourself. And I think that that's, and then
Mm,
also want to embody that, like, there's so much anger deflected and or aimed at, you and other people in the queer community for that combination, because that's not what society rewards, right? That's not how you make it in this world. And I think for me, something that I've been kind of trying to like level set with is, I don't think that our societies or structures are set up for people to want to have that intention so that
mm.
they can liberate themselves in that kind of way. And I feel like it's almost like an anger that they're feeling at the system as well as their own journey. And but I don't, sometimes, this is my perspective, I don't think they're always able to understand or articulate it in that way. And then it's sort of like, well, why do you get to live outside the system, right? Like, why are, you're you have to be in the matrix just like the rest of us, basically.
Do you know, speaking of the Matrix, do you know there was a character originally in the script that was a woman in the real world, but a man in the Matrix?
Oh, really?
And they thought it was too much. They cut the transness out. Anywho, Google it, everybody. But what is so important is that you make me think of is why I love being LGBTQ. One of the reasons is I was never in the Matrix. I never felt like for 1 second, even as a young child, that I was ever in the Matrix. And that has been the biggest gift to me my entire life. Never, it didn't feel like a gift for a long time, but it just was so easy to drop the Matrix because I was like, oh, I'll just stop trying to get in there, you know?
100%. And I feel I for the longest time was so upset that I didn't belong.
Mm,
I used to be so upset that I didn't belong. I mean, there was so much wounding for me around not feeling not like I didn't belong. And it wasn't like a belong to a specific set of people. It was just in general. Like it was just like I completely felt like I was like no matter what was happening, like I was just always not going to really feel resonant with the people around me. And now I'm like it's my I you know it's taken me a very long time, but I feel like I'm at the place where I'm like wow, like I I don't well, not only do I not need to, but like it's like I'm so happy that I'm queer. And I on National Coming Out Day, I posted just something very simple on my social media and I just said I love being queer. Like and I was like I love being queer and I don't need to be all this like oh like all this bullshit. It's just like I like being queer. And I do identify as queer too and I think it has a specific connotation and political explanation as well that I think is important to me to use as an identification because like from the bell hooks perspective their her definition of queer is like although queer can be defined as a person who you sleep with that can be a context of it it's about being at odds with everything around you and having to work and she doesn't use the word hustle, but I'm putting it in here to
mhm.
hustle in order to learn how to live and thrive in a world that is completely again not against you, but is not for you.
You could say against. I'm fine with that. Yeah.
And that just speaks so deeply to the resonance of my experience, where like you know, queerness is this embodiment of not trying to um make yourself something to be more palatable for another person or to another a group of people so that you gain acceptance. And another thing that really helped me on that journey, I don't know if you're familiar with them, Alok Vaid Menon. They said that
Yes.
in their Man Enough podcast, which I listened to when it first came out, like the emphasis that people have on human rights in general is explanation of why they need it rather than compassion for the fact that they're just a human. And comprehension over compassion, I think, is what they said. And that really changed even a lot for me because I think that I grew up as a queer person thinking that if I could school them in persuasion, right? If I could school them in articulation, if I could lay out all the facts, like they would
Hmm.
somehow change their minds because I think that I was raised in some way to believe that like facts and like grounded debate and like you know like the whole like more the morality of it all will get shaken out based on who has the best way of convincing someone. And I very early figured that that's not true. Like it doesn't matter how much you argue with someone or how much you try to explain your humanity, they you know they can still deny it and they can still say that that's not who you know they can still say like thank you for the facts but like this is my belief, right? And I think that that was a really big turning point for me to stop trying to fight for my humanity because it was like in fighting for my humanity I was also feeling wounded that I had to fight for it in the first place. And I it really gave me a lot more compassion for myself of like it's not that I have to engage or disengage with someone based on this. It's just like I don't need to argue with someone in order to believe that I deserve my humanity.
Worse. A lot of people, so I'm non-binary, and a lot of people will just ask questions about us without even the realization that you being in a position where you can just ask questions, big quote energy, just ask questions about another group of human beings means that we're already starting from a lesser place. you know, whether those questions get answered or whether you think they're reasonable or not, whatever. But I never, I never just ask questions about, you know, cis straight men, although I have a lot of them. In terms of that group,
Yes.
you
Well,
know,
also
it's,
I think because we were raised in a community and society that we had to learn about it regardless, right? And
yeah.
so I think that like we don't have to ask questions because that's the expectation, right? And I think that that
Mm.
maybe speaks to a larger context of like patriarchy and how people that don't belong specifically to, you know, the cis straight white men perspective are expected to know everything about that culture, which is what I will call it, without having and expected to know about it and talk about it. But then there's no expectation on the other end for them to understand, empathize, or acknowledge the humanity as well. And that's the hierarchy based on the patriarchal system.
You just made me think of something. I don't know if this was true for you, but I could see when I was growing up, I feel I don't how shall I articulate this? Because I don't think I have any special powers per se, but being an LGBTQ, I could see things that other people were not seeing. So that's, I guess that's part of being human, right? My perspective was different than other people. But one thing that I projected all the time, thought I was witnessing around me was men struggling to like be the mostest, bestest man kind of
Mm,
thing. And just because I it was very painful, but I was hopelessly never going to be the bestest man possible. That was never going to happen, even though everyone seemed to want it from me. There was a kind of freedom in that and a kind of witnessing of like, why are you all trying so hard? Why are you doing this? You know, kind of thing. And that persists for me to this day. I just would want everybody to be comfortable.
mm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Why, yeah, why are you trying so hard to fit into this mold? You know, and I think this is another conversation too that doesn't often get had. I mean, it gets talked about, but maybe not at such high emphasis on how patriarchy harms men as well, and how it divorces them or cuts them off from their own humanity and their own ability to you know be the full spectrum of who they are. And I think that there's a lot of also pressure placed on them to be a certain way and to act in a certain way as well. And I think that that's contributing to men not being able to see why dismantling patriarchy is helpful for them as well. And why
Mm-hmm.
they're able to completely fully be themselves because by not having to adhere by that anymore, they can truly explore who they are outside of that, regardless of, you know, regardless of what it means for them to quote be what they were told being a man is.
For sure. And it's like, you have all the privilege in the world. Let me play the world's tiniest violin for you about all the suffering you're going through because of that. Right. Um, but it is real. And it's like, how's that working out for you? So you're fighting so much for these boxes and you're at the top, but you're also under incredible pressure. So why don't we just all relax a little bit
Yeah.
and and take a look at these boxes and maybe throw some of them out
Mm,
or change them, you know?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Going back to what you were talking about with the two videos, how did that evolve from, you know, making two videos and going viral to what you're doing today? Because I feel like that's it's become very expansive.
Well, there's a big gap in there, isn't there?
Yeah.
I was, I did. The really interesting thing about me is I'm popular. That's the really interesting thing. Um, but it's always been true. I'm kind of a thumb stopper. I get people talking. That's for sure. In social media, we call it the thumb stopper because people will be scrolling through with their thumb and their thumb will stop just based on what I look like.
Mm,
Eyeshadow and beard. They're like, oh, what's that person about? But then hopefully, like you were saying so eloquently, I cut through some of the BS to go to connect with people's hearts because I've been through so much. and survived so much. So from Vine, I went to what was called Twitter at the time, then went to Instagram, which is still called Instagram, and then nowadays TikTok, and magnetized people to my channel and my mission on all of those platforms in all of those places. And I think it's not necessarily because I'm beautiful, although I am, or colorful, and nice to look at, but it is that deeper message that people resonate with and feel less alone. That's my hope anyway.
Mm.
Did that help to answer it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
And
I've always just been compelled to build on that you're not alone
mhm.
message, honestly.
And do you feel that that is resonant from your time being in the monastery?
Oh, I sure do. And of course, the Buddhist way is to connect you with yourself as a remedy for loneliness. And to me, that you're also studying within a community, of course, but to be in a hermitage living in the woods by yourself without the baggage of how I felt so alone being in the woods as a kid was really a transformative um, life for me.
Mm. Mm. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
What led you to writing books?
That is so interesting. It's when I was well known on Vine and Penguin reached out to me and wanted me to write one. And I was like, you got to be joking. But they saw some potential there, and that became How to Be You. And I it's can I tell you a secret?
Yeah.
It's like a Buddhist bridge book. It's not like a right in your face Buddhist, but it is the people who have zero experience with some of those principles to bridge them to maybe taking a path towards some more spiritual stuff.
Mm.
But shh, that's just between you and me. Hopefully it helps people, no matter who they are or where they are, feel like the stuff I've been through is similar to what they've been through.
Mm. I think one of the things that I really liked at the end of the third chapter that I read in your second book was when you wrote,
Take your own advice.
yeah, take you under advice.
Mm-hmm.
That really resonated with me was when you wrote your letter to your 6-year-old self. And, I've there's been a lot of talk about like inner child healing and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes I get a little bit prickly with that kind of talk and conversation, if I'm being completely honest. Because I feel like so often the orientation when people talk about that is how wounded the child is and how wounded your like 6-year-old self, rather than treating the 6-year-old self saying you're not wounded. And you do know how to go through these things. You're not wounded at all, actually. And I think that had that reframe to me of being like, actually, your 6-year-old self or your younger self or whoever like that is actually the one that you want to be looking for. I mean, maybe advice is the word or guidance or whatever, because I have always felt like my 6-year-old self or my 8-year-old self or whoever is the one that actually knows the answer. And it's not me as this like adult being, whatever, that's sitting here being like, now, little 6-year-old, I know that you went through shit, but like, it's okay. And I'm going to help you, because to me, that has always felt very trite. Um,
Sure.
and
It also probably, sorry to interrupt you, it feels like a burden.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
now I got this kid inside me. I got a parent.
yeah,
I don't
right.
want to be a parent.
Right. Exactly. I'm like, listen, I don't think I want kids in the real world. Like, I don't like,
Let alone the therapy world.
right. And so it's like, why am I having this burden of responsibility being placed on me? And I've always had a really hard time with that sort of like, I don't know, that sort of modality, if you will. And the way that
Mhm.
you articulated it and phrased it of being like honor them and who they are and how they are experiencing what they did, because that is actually what they need, but also from a space of like they have what they need, or they are exactly who they are and there's no problem. is like a really way of saying like it's not about my 6-year-old self being wounded. It's just about honoring like what who they are, and just knowing what that experience is, and knowing that that is the authority as well. And that, and like I'm me as me now am not some hierarchical parent or child or parent figure or adult figure that is sitting here like thinking about like the 7 different versions of me that I'm like somehow trying to parent. And it feels
Manage.
it feels hierarchical to me. And to be
Mhm.
honest with you, it feels like it's like still kind of based in, I don't know, like these cultural things that we've been talking about that still feel wrong to me. It's like, why do I have authority as a 33-year-old over the 6-year-old that still, I think, understands their experience very clearly and understands what it is? And it's like, it's still this idea of not trusting them.
And that was the problem originally when you were 6. The
Exactly.
33-year-olds weren't trusting you. Yeah. So who wants to repeat or rehash that? Yeah, to me, 6-year-old Jeffrey, for example, is charming, lovely, dancing around, cute, and wonderful. And as you pointed out, also wise. I view inner child work as that kid, that little Jeffrey, is the memory, remembers what it's like to be free, actually. All this stuff it happened in the world since then, during then, all kinds of stuff happened. But 6-year-old Jeffrey is beautiful and gorgeous and dances around. And I need to remember those things as I'm a little older than 33. But I need to remember those now as an adult. And you make me think of time and time again, interviewers will ask me, when did you know you were different? And that framing just gets on my nerves so much.
Because it's based on the hegemonic understanding that being queer or being quote different is creating exclusivity instead of inclusivity.
Right. And it's like some defining moment in your life. And I always like to answer, I haven't found out yet, because I'm not different. I want the same thing as other human beings. But also, in terms of 6-year-old Jeffrey, 6-year-old Jeffrey didn't know that either. 6-year-old Jeffrey was aware that other people had a problem, but not that I'm like different. That's a very weird framing to me.
Yes, it
And
makes
othering,
no
frankly.
100%, and
Yeah.
it makes me think of like there's this story that I had where I don't honestly, I don't remember how old I was, but I was young enough. And my brother's 3 years older than me, and he would always
Mm-hmm.
have a friend come over, and my friend my friend had his friends, excuse me, had like these just like beautiful piercing eyes. And I remember I answered the door and I like told him, and I think I was like 9. I like really have like I have
Yes.
no idea, but I told him, I was like, "You have beautiful eyes," and I got so embarrassed because I was like,
Oh.
like I hope this, like I hope this doesn't mean that, someone says something or someone tells someone, or this means it's going to be interpreted this way." And it's like I feel like it's like I didn't have an issue with expressing how I felt. It was everyone else having issues with expressing who I am. And it makes me think of uh gosh, I'm forgetting the name of the podcast, but it's Katya, and I'm forgetting her other name, but it's the drag queen.
Trixie and Katja.
Yeah, there we go, thank you. And they said
The
something on one of their research.
Bald and the Beautiful. That's the name of the podcast.
Oh, thank you. It
Because
made me think of something that Trixie said. It's like, we have no problem being queer. Like being queer is not a burden, and it's not an issue. It's
mm-hmm.
how straight people feel or react to us being queer. And like I feel that really help like reframes, especially in how what you were just talking about of like, when did you know you were different? And it's like, stop assuming that your way or the way that is the implicit
Default.
default. And that I think really leads to people feeling extra or like separated, because it's the implication behind that they are not to be, that is not the normal behavior. And then you have to go through, I feel like I had to go through this like, oh, it's okay that I'm different, but it's like, no, I'm not different. I'm just who I am, and everyone else has the problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And right, I mean, tell me if this was your experience, but you were you right up until opening the door, seeing beautiful eyes and saying, wow, those are beautiful eyes. You're just you living your life. And all the like, I hope nobody finds out is a thing that those other people laid on you after the fact.
yeah,
And it's like, that's not like an inherent truth that 9-year-olds should not be saying you have beautiful eyes to people. That's just, that's something laid on us afterwards. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, we are coming up on an hour. Is
Coming
there?
up on, I think we rolled over it.
Yeah, we're a couple
It's in the
minutes
rearview
past.
mirror.
I didn't want to cut off because we
No, it went
were
by so fast because it was so fun.
yes. I didn't want to cut off because I feel like we are in some juicy combos.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was my honor to talk to you today.
Mhm.
And it's it's wonderful to connect with people who have had similar experiences.
Yeah, and that's what this podcast is about, is just connecting with people and having them share their experiences and how we resonate with them, because I think at the end of the day, like, our ability to tell our story and to articulate our experience is, to me, the only way. I know that sounds very deterministic, but it feels to me the only way for us to band together and feel like we are not only not alone, but that our experience is legitimate and valid.
The only way to survive, perhaps?
Mm. I think it's the only way to fight back against the structures that we live under.
Sure. I mean, we didn't even mention capitalism or creeping authoritarianism or any of that stuff
Or
yet.
fascism, or how
That's
that,
our second episode.
I mean, yeah, if you want to come back on, I have a lot of things to say about that. So
Yeah, me too.
that
Me
now,
too.
that episode is the episode where people are going to lose their, they're going to lose their minds. I will say that in my other podcast that I have
Mhm.
called Burn It Down Already, like, we did do an episode on the linkness between capitalism and whiteness, and
Mhm.
we did receive like quite a bit of flack from that. And it was so surprising to see, because not because I'm not surprised that people are not didn't resonate with the message, but that they were so caught up in it, and they were so offended, and they like could not handle what it is that we had to say about it.
I know a thing or two about people not being able to handle what I have to say. Um, yeah, it gets better over time.
Hmm. Well, maybe, sometime down the road, I can invite you back on, and we can talk about that as we roll into the new whatever reality that we all are in.
Well, we'll see what it is. Exciting times. Certainly not boring to be alive
Yes.
in 2023.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we wrap up?
Oh, heck no. Just connect with me, however.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Jeffrey, so much for being on the podcast. To our listeners, of course, if you have any questions or feedback, or want to share or resonate with our experiences, I'd love to connect with you. You can find me on my Instagram. It's Curious Storyteller Pod, or, with Jeffrey as well, if you're open to that.
Yeah, what do you mean? If I'm open to getting DMs and messages
Yes,
from the world?
from the world.
Well, let's just say I have someone who checks that for me.
Oh, great.
let's just say I'm not in the DMs as a queer creator. Um, but yeah, and anybody can email me through the website and stuff like that. And I love to connect with people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and we will see you all next time.
My pleasure. Bye, everybody.
Bye.